Yo, what's up, guys? So today we're actually going to be breaking down a problem of open attacking, when to do it versus when not to do it. It's actually a fairly common problem that I think a lot of intermediate level players struggle with, and this is going to be something that will make you a better player to understand when to open attack and when not to. So what is open attacking? Open attack is when you jam an attack on the first action of your attack turn, basically. Typically, the alternative is developing units before you attack. So to answer this question, I'm going to need to ask a few more. Specifically, there are several questions you need to ask yourself before thinking about whether to open attack or not. But first, let's talk about the general downside of playing your units before attacking. I mean, why would you even think about open attacking? Well, the biggest reason is that Runeterra works with defender's advantage, basically, which is going to be very different from a game like Hearthstone. What that means is because the blockers get to choose what unit fights what, that means that typically when you play a unit as the attacker and then your opponent plays a unit as the defender, your attack usually just got a little bit worse. Because they get to choose what fights what, a defender will inherently, usually, there are many exceptions, but usually will just have more value than an attacker. Unless, of course, your attacker is really big or has several effects that will kind of cheat the system, like, for example, activating a specific ability on the attack or an overwhelm or something like that. Okay, so the first question you need to be asking yourself when you're thinking about open attacking or should you develop your units is basically to think about what the opponent's answers are and to categorize them as either fast or slow answers, right? So what that's going to mean is basically anything that's at slow speed, like a unit or a slow speed spell, that's going to be a slow answer, whereas fast answers are, fast and burst speed spells. Now, why that matters is because if the opponent's scariest cards they could counter your board state with are fast speed cards, or burst, of course, then you want to be developing units so that at least when they are countering your attack with their faster burst speed thing, you're at least spending your mana on that turn, right? So if, for example, their scariest card in a situation is like Will of Ionia or Harsh Winds, let's say you've got a Darius on board or something that gets pretty countered by a spell like that, you want to be developing into that attack a bit more typically. Because, of course, you want to at least get value when they go in to stop your big attacking dude. You want to at least be spending your mana for that attack. That's the most important thing, right? But, of course, if their scariest card is going to be a slow speed card, think Ruination, Avalanche are obviously big slow speed spells, but a lot of these are units as well, like Frenzied Skitterer, Used Cask Salesman, Arachnoid Sentry. These are ones that are basically going to be punishing you big on attacks. But even just big blockers, like if they just play a large unit that will outscale you and will outblock you, like Garen, like some unit that will just tank a hit and it won't mind, that's also going to be pretty scary. Now, one thing you'll notice is that well-built decks have a combination of both fast answers and slow answers. This is actually one of the underlying principles of deck building, right? That, especially if you're kind of like the slower deck in the matchup, you need to have a good combination of slow speed punishers, things that are effectively going to pressure the opponent into open attack, and then fast speed answers, which are going to punish them for open attacking. You need both because otherwise the opponent will come to the decision that you have, an exploitable spot. They can basically, pick one or the other in too common of scenarios, and your deck will kind of get exploited. Okay, so these examples are probably mostly going to be covering early game positions because those are probably going to be the most common ones where people are, struggling thinking about open attacking or not. Let's go to this one. So I'm on turn 4 against a Kinko Elusives deck, and they must have a really bricked out hand because they actually haven't played anything yet, right? So what that represents is, a handful of basically anything they would have played, prior to that, like Omen Hawk, like Green Glade Duo isn't in their hand. So what that's going to mean is they have a very high probability of having other things. I do want to attack here, so you can think about the math on that. This attack is, of course, going to represent 6 damage if I just do it now. So I've got basically 6 damage guaranteed. So I could play my units and then attack. I actually have some pretty great units to develop here. I've got Boomker Rookie and Battlecaster, and that's going to be a lot more damage if I develop this into the attack. or I can attack. So what I want to do here is I want to think about the opponent's slow speed answers and the opponent's fast speed answers, okay? So let's think about Kinko elusives. What are their fast speed answers? Well, mostly, you know, it's going to be combat tricks, which they can't really do when they don't have units on board. Stuff like Elixir of Iron, it's not really going to work. Will of Ionia doesn't really do much against this board. You know, probably not even worth using. And, you know, there's like stuff like Deny, which, I mean, I guess you could technically use it on the Legion Saboteur effect. You're not going to deny that. And Deny is not really an answer to be considering too much unless you're playing a spell on your attack that's deniable. Okay, so I have the guaranteed 6 attack now. That's pretty much not going to get reduced unless the opponent does something weird like Will, which probably isn't worth it anyway. So what are the slow speed threats? Kinko Wayfinder is going to be the big one, namely just being able to drop 3 cards on one action. You know, it'll pull 2 Omen Hawks or it'll pull Blade Scouts or something like that. Being able to drop those cards on one action means my attack is going to get really devalued. So even though we have an amazing like increase on our damage here when we go with Battlecaster and Boomker Rookie, that would be an incredible amount of extra damage. The odds of him having Kinko Wayfinder is high because of the way he's played the first few turns, and most importantly, he doesn't really have anything to punish the open attack. Again, it's about fast versus slow, because his deck has a bit of a weakness. This is something that Kinko Wayfinders kind of does have as a weakness. They don't have a great way to punish open attacks, right? They've got Will, and that's good against certain things, but they don't have too much. So we can open attack into them, punish the fact that they don't really have any fast speed way to stop this kind of board state, and avoid the Kinko Wayfinder that the opponent is very likely going to be on. Okay, let's go ahead and pull up a very different kind of situation here, actually. So this is a ladder game against my boy 5. He's actually a pretty good player. And we are playing, you know, another aggressive deck. This is kind of a version of PNZ Noxus. And he's playing like a very slow play control, Freljord Shadow Isle style deck. We're on turn 7. And I'm faced in this kind of awkward position where I have Draven on board, a precious pet. I've got some tools that are going to be, you know, good no matter what. I've got a Battlecaster that I'm staring down. And I'm in an interesting position, which is, do I go ahead and just attack, get my 5 damage in, or do I play the Battlecaster and risk it for an additional 4 damage? I am almost doubling up in damage by playing the Battlecaster. So let's think, what are the scary cards he could have here, and count, you know, let's group them into fast and slow speed answers. So, I mean, he could have Avalanche. That's not a bad play. You know, it would kill off Precious Pet and the Battlecaster. He's actually already played 1 Avalanche earlier this game, so I'm willing to put that on slightly lower odds. He could have Vile Feast. Vile Feast is actually very interesting here, because it is sort of, in a way, a pseudo-slow answer. Because if I open attack, it's true that he can Vile Feast to kill my Precious Pet, but his Spiderling doesn't come out in time to block chump my Draven, right? So Vile Feast, I'm actually going to kind of lump into a slow answer category. Overall, it can be either, but in this situation, it is actually kind of a punishment for developing, because it, you know, allows him to kill 1 unit and threaten a chump on another that he wouldn't have had if I had just attacked into him, right? Then he's got like Withering Wail, which only kills Precious Pet, not too scary here. Grasp, which is, you know, fairly scary, fairly common he'll have here. And he doesn't have enough mana for like Ruination. He always has like a few weak units. There's always going to be stuff like Avaros and Sentry, maybe sometimes Hapless Aristocrat, depending on the deck, right? So those weak units are always going to be options here. So I think about this a little bit, and typically you do want to, you know, when in doubt, in a lot of similar situations, you will be open attacking. But it goes back to what I said earlier, which is most importantly, think about, you know, what are the scariest things, and unless he's on a pretty specific hand, he won't be able to play 2 different cards here, right? At 7 mana, most of their things are pretty expensive. There's some combos of like a 2 and a 5 or something like that. But mostly, I'm scared of Grasp. His odds of having the Avalanche are a little bit lower here. Grasp is probably going to be kind of the biggest scare card here. He's already played a Hearthguard as well, I'm going to point out. Otherwise, that would be a scary option somewhat. I mean, it does have the ability to block one of our units, and we can counter with Brothers Bond, but it would slow us down a lot. I'm going to make the call to develop the Battlecaster into this. And it's for a couple reasons. it's mostly because, you know, of the cards he's already played, and the fact that I'm a little bit behind in this situation, so I need to take some slightly riskier line. And the Battlecaster, of course, just threatens a good bit more damage, right? We're not slowing down ourselves at all. And because all of the scariest things he could play exist at fast speed, high mana cost, that means that, of course, you know, we want to be developing into him. Because we're kind of punishing ourselves. If his answer to my board state is a fast speed card, then I'm basically just wasting my mana that turn for no reason. Again, the objective is to be able to spend at least as much mana as your opponent for the attack step, right? So that means if they're on a fast speed answer, I want to be playing slow speed cards because their fast answer is going to hit whether I open attack or not. And my last general tip is that there's certain units and certain board states that just make developing worth it. The most common example is going to be challenger units because, of course, you get to choose what hits what when you have challenger units. It's kind of like you're sort of cheating the system because normally the reason, you know, open attacking is good is to stop the opponent from making more use out of their defender's advantage, but challenger has attacker's advantage because you get to choose the combat with challengers, which means you want to be developing deeper when you have kind of a challenger heavy board or, you know, challengers in your hand that you're playing. Alright guys, I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys off with one quick example game that is trying to kind of like combine a lot of these elements together and show you guys what it looks like when you're kind of like thinking about every spot in the correct way. Again, this is mostly I'm just trying to make sure you guys have the tools to come to the right decisions when you have them. As long as you're thinking about the questions in the right way, then you'll be good. So check out this game. Basically, you know, my opponent opens with Tracker, I play Rearguard, and then, you know, Tracker's gonna bash me for free, right? They're on attacking odds, I'm attacking evens. So now I've got this spot on turn 2 where the question is, do I open attack with this Rearguard, or do I develop pet Rearguard? Now, open attacking would pretty much secure me 3 damage. It's really hard to block that Rearguard. He would pretty much never block it with Tracker. Like, there's almost no hand that would do that. You know, you're usually on Bannerman or Protector or something that would, you know, be worth keeping the Tracker alive. So typically the Rearguard is going to find consistent value if it attacks here, but if I develop, you know, the Rearguard and the Precious Pet, I'll have a higher ceiling. What are the scare cards? Well, it's turn 2. I don't have to worry about spells. It's all about units, right? So I'm thinking about, okay, Bright Steel Protectors, War Chefs. That doesn't really punish, specifically the War Chefs doesn't punish, because it can't block Precious Pet, and it doesn't really have a favorable trade into Legion Rearguard either, right? So I'm not too afraid of War Chefs. What does really scare me is Bright Steel Protector, right? Bright Steel Protector would actually threaten this board really hard because it would put the barrier on the Fleet Feather Tracker, and then the Tracker could free block with barrier my Rearguard, and the Bright Steel Protector could even block my Precious Pet if it wanted to. More likely, it would just take out the other Rearguard, right? So Bright Steel Protector would absolutely shut down this attack, basically. We also want to be a little scared of House Spider because he's the Noxus version of the deck. You expect them to be running House Spider, and it's not going to worry me too much here because, of course, you know, if he's got House Spider, then I'm going to need to kind of like slow play it anyway, make sure that he doesn't get too much value out of Bannerman. So I don't really mind him blocking my Rearguard with House Spider, and Precious Pet can't be blocked anyway. So I'm going to ignore that mostly for now. Let's just talk about the Protector. That's the scare card here. So what do? Do we attack and get our 3 attack in guaranteed, or do we risk it for the 8 total? Well, it becomes a bit of a math problem at that point, right? And it's going to be pretty simple here. So this is basically a very, very simple simplification of EV, or the concept of effective value, which was invented in poker. And basically what that means is it's just the probabilistic value when you multiply the probabilities out of your plays, right? So what are the odds he has Bright Steel Protector in hand? On turn 2, it's about 55%. If you punch that into the hypergeometric calculator, you'll find that. Because you're always going to be mulliganing for Bright Steel Protector, and you're never going to kick it out of the opening hand, right? So it's about 55, like 57%-ish. Okay? Depending on exactly how you mulligan. So a bit more than 50%, but because my upside is more than doubling up, it's a good wager to take, right? Because, you know, he's got basically, you know, a bit over 50% chance of shutting us down, but we're doing more than double damage by taking the risk, right? If it was a 6 damage total, if I didn't have the pet, and if the decision was just second Rearguard on top of the first Rearguard, I would probably just open attack with a rear guard, take my 3, because I'm risking a double up for something that has less than a 50% chance, right? It's going to be like 45% chance that he doesn't have the Brightsteel Protector. But since I'm more than doubling up, I can easily take these odds at, 55% chance of him having Brightsteel Protector. So the correct play here is to develop into this attack. If he's got War Chefs, he can't really take any value blocks anyway. If he's got House Spider, it doesn't matter too much. And I will take the bet that he doesn't have Protector. I am priced in at those odds. So let's go ahead, and play this out as it is. He ends up not having the answer to specifically the development. He doesn't actually have any units he can play here at all in this case. But we're getting in a pretty effective 5 damage, and he blocks with his bird, of course, which means he doesn't really have big plans for it, don't have the Brightsteel Protector or anything else. So he's going to play LoR Protege, we're going to play Draven. I'm mostly just going to be focusing on the attack turns of this game, because that's, of course, where it all matters. Because those are the big decisions we make. This is a video about open attacking and not open attacking, and every attack turn in this game is actually sort of built around the idea of, should we open attack, should we not? So let's look at this spot. Should we open attack? We're in a similar position here. We've got, Draven and the Legion rearguard. What are we doing? So a big thing here is it's going to be turn 4, right? And on turn 4 with this deck, you're definitely going to be worried about Bannerman. Bannerman is a very, very common 4-drop. And if he plays Bannerman, well, this attack gets quite a bit worse. If he wants to, take a block from his Bannerman, it would be a 4/4 if it gets the proc, which it almost always does. And that would shut down my rearguard right away. So what do we get by developing here? Well, we've got Cask Salesman, Saboteur. We don't have a crazy amount that we're going to get. Cask Salesman is, if anything, a bit more of a defensive card. You're not really getting too much value out of playing it on an attack, right? Whereas Legion Saboteur is just a little bit too small to matter much here. I'm in a position where I've secured enough dominance early, getting him down to 15 right away, and this attack basically stopping him from blocking. It's really, really hard for him to take an effective block here. So I'd be able to get him down to 9. And because we're in a different situation where we've already dealt a good amount of damage early, and getting him down to 9 in range of Decimate is good, I mostly am afraid of Bannerman coming down and ruining this attack. I'm going to go ahead and shove in here and take the open attack in this case. In this case, it ends up being a little bit more valuable too, mostly just because, my units I could have played are a little bit weak. Opponent plays Bannerman, and they're going to whiff it anyway. They just very, very bad luck. Looks like they have probably a House Spider on top of the deck. Some people run, a couple of weirder things in the deck. Like sometimes you'll see like a Whirling Death or something like that, which is fine too. But we can read that as well. And basically, it kind of goes like this. It's just about thinking about whether it's worth it or not, and asking yourself at every step, what are the scariest things it could have? Now, you'll notice in this game, it's all about early positions in units. I am not thinking about spells in this kind of situation very much at all, right? So, of course, they're going to go ahead and develop a challenger. I'm going to play my Cask Salesman, which is going to stop a few extra attacks. And now I've got a very, very interesting position. Let's pause here and look at this hand and think about what I'm going to be doing for the next couple of turns, okay? The opponent's at 9 health, and I've got a Decimate in my hand, which means I have a really, really great opportunity to basically kill them. And I have a board that's developed a bit wider than theirs too, right? Because, I have the ability to kill the Swiftwing Lancer here with the Draven's axes. That's going to be a pretty easy thing to take out. I'm going to do something a little bit unique. Because I'm in a unique situation here to open attack next turn, I'm going to use Draven's Whirling Death. Now, this seems a little bit weird, because you can see here that the Draven's Whirling Death here is targeting the LoR Protege. What that means is basically I'm using my Draven's Whirling Death as, you can think of it like I'm playing a Legion Saboteur, right? Because all I'm doing is saving my Saboteur. So I'm basically playing a 3-mana Legion Saboteur, which is kind of crazy. That's not very valuable, right? A 3-mana Legion Saboteur, that's not very valuable at all. But check out the exact situation we're in again. If my Draven dies, the Draven's Whirling Death would just become another Draven. I had 2 unit mana, which means we can't even play the Draven there, right? Which is really, really big. We needed to be able to play something in that situation. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to get the value off of spending our mana, right? So another way of thinking about this is we're pre-committing to open attack. Like, look at the hand state. We have the Legion Grenadier in our hand, and if I use the Whirling Death as a Whirling Death instead of a Draven, I'm able to play out my entire hand this turn. What that allows me to do is commit to open attack. Because here's the thing about Draven, I would have had to play a Draven on turn 6. I didn't have mana for it on turn 5. I only had 2 unit mana. So because of that, I did not want to have to develop units into turn 6. Turn 6 is kind of scary because, you know, I already have the game in a good state. I want to play it safe. I want to be open attacking with an impactful board. So I use the Whirling Death in this spot instead. And instead of saving the Draven, I'm actually going to go ahead and save the Saboteur, which is going to be a little bit more impactful just because, of course, you know, you get the guaranteed damage in. It's less of a value for the opponent to block it, of course, right? So we use the Whirling Death to protect the Saboteur, and we play the Legion Rearguard after the combat. The reason we do all of this is because we're looking at our hand, we're looking at the board state, and we think to ourselves, we commit to open attacking, right? We're just committing to open attacking. Now, the unique thing about Decimate as a card is that Decimate is actually, it's sort of not really a slow speed card because you don't have to use it before an attack phase. You want to use it after the attack step. So Decimate, even though it's a slow speed card, it's not really slow in terms of how you should think about it as a card. It's effectively going to be your over-the-top answer for after combat. You might as well be able to use it during combat, and it would do the same thing on your attack turn, right? So, we have the Decimate. Turns out here, we didn't even need it. The opponent didn't have enough answers to our open attack with the Saboteur that we saved, so our attack shipped in is just going to be good enough to close this game outright. Alright guys, so that last game was, I think, a pretty good example of basically the idea of when you should open attack, when you shouldn't, and how you should think about it. There's going to be some math involved, there's going to be some probabilities. When in doubt, very, very common, useful probability tip, if the opponent has a 3 of unit in their deck that they are keeping in their opening mulligan, roughly in, you know, early game positions, anywhere between turn 1 and turn 5, it is roughly about 60% chance that they will have it in their hand, at least one copy of their 3 of card. Again, that's rough because that covers the entire early game, like turn 1 through turn 5 or 6 or whatever. So that's just something that's good to keep in your mind as a rule of thumb. Anyway, that's it for me. That's all I have for this video. See you guys.